Hashtag a single dad thought the date went perfect. Until he learned why she really came. The restaurant bill sat between them, already paid. Mark stared at Eliza's face, watching as tears welled in her eyes. "I need to tell you something," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I didn't come tonight just for a date." His world, which had felt so perfectly aligned just moments before, began to tilt on its axis. What he would learn next would change everything he thought he knew about love, trust, and second chances. Mark Collins hadn't been on a proper date in 3 years, not since Sarah's death had left him a single father to their daughter, Lily. At 38, he'd convinced himself that his romantic life was permanently on hold, that raising Lily and keeping his small bookstore afloat consumed all the emotional energy he had to give. That is, until Eliza walked into his shop one rainy Tuesday afternoon. "Do you have any recommendations for a 7-year-old who thinks she's already outgrown princess stories?" she'd asked, raindrops still clinging to her dark curls. Something about her warm smile and the intelligent glint in her eyes made Mark's practiced, helpful bookseller speech falter. He'd taken her to the children's section, their hands accidentally brushing as they both reached for the same book. "My daughter Lily loves this series," he'd said, surprised by how easily her name slipped out. He rarely mentioned Lily to customers. "She's 7 too." Eliza's eyes had brightened. "What a coincidence. My niece just turned 7 last month. I'm determined to be the cool aunt who always brings the perfect books." Their conversation had flowed effortlessly from children's literature to their own favorite books, and before Mark quite realized what was happening, he'd asked her to coffee. Coffee turned into dinner plans, and for the first time in years, Mark found himself standing in front of his bathroom mirror, fussing with his hair and wondering if his blue shirt brought out his eyes the way Sarah had always said it did. Lily had watched him with curious eyes as he prepared for the date. "You look handsome, Daddy," she'd said, helping him choose between 2 ties with the serious concentration only a 7-year-old could muster. "Is she going to be my new mommy?" The question had caught him off guard. "Sweetie, it's just dinner. I'm just making a new friend." But as the evening with Eliza progressed, Mark couldn't help but feel that maybe, just maybe, it could someday be more. Their conversation never lagged. They discovered shared passions for historical fiction, hiking, and terrible sci-fi movies. She laughed at his jokes, even the bad ones, and the way she listened when he spoke made him feel truly seen for the first time since losing Sarah. When he mentioned Lily, Eliza's expression had softened. "Tell me about her," she'd said, and Mark found himself sharing stories about his daughter's fierce independence, her artistic talent, and her struggle adjusting to school after losing her mother. "She sounds wonderful," Eliza had said, reaching across the table to squeeze his hand briefly. "You're doing a great job, Mark." Those simple words of affirmation had nearly brought tears to his eyes. The weight of solo parenting often felt crushing, and hearing that he wasn't failing completely was more meaningful than she could know. As they finished dessert, a chocolate cake they decided to share, Mark was already mentally planning their second date. Maybe something Lily could join them for, a casual outing to the park or the children's museum. And then Eliza had set down her fork, taken a deep breath, and uttered those words, "I need to tell you something. I didn't come tonight just for a date." The world seemed to slow as Mark waited for her to continue, his mind racing through possibilities. Was she moving away? Already in a relationship? Some kind of journalist writing an exposé on single parents? "I recognized your last name when you introduced yourself at the bookstore," Eliza said, her voice steady despite the tears gathering in her eyes. "Collins isn't that common, and you mentioned your late wife was named Sarah." I knew Sarah." Mark felt as though all the air had been sucked from the room. "You knew Sarah? How?" Eliza pulled her phone from her purse, tapped the screen a few times, and turned it toward him. There on the screen was a photo of a much younger Eliza with her arm around a beaming Sarah. They were standing on a beach, sunburned and laughing. "We were roommates in college," Eliza explained. "Best friends for those 4 years. But we lost touch after graduation when I moved to Seattle for work. I tried reaching out on social media a few years ago, but couldn't find her. When I moved back here last month, I searched again and her voice caught. I found her obituary instead. Mark stared at the photo, at his wife's face, younger than he'd ever known her, but unmistakably Sarah with that crooked smile he'd fallen in love with. Why didn't you say something at the bookstore? Or when we met for coffee? Eliza wiped at her eyes. I was shocked when I first realized who you were. I kept thinking, what are the odds? Then I was curious, I wanted to know what kind of man Sarah had chosen, what kind of father you were to her child. She took a shaky breath. And then I genuinely enjoyed talking with you, and I was afraid if I told you, you'd think I had some weird agenda. Don't you? Mark asked, unable to keep the edge from his voice. Is this some kind of morbid curiosity? Checking up on your old friend's replacement? No, Eliza said firmly. It started as coincidence, then curiosity, but now. She hesitated. Now I'm sitting across from a man I genuinely like, who happens to be connected to someone I once cared about deeply. I should have told you sooner, and I'm sorry for that. But I'm not sorry we met. Mark ran a hand through his hair, his emotions a turbulent mix of betrayal, confusion, and, strangely, relief. There had been so few people in his life who had known Sarah, who could talk about her as she was before cancer took her, before she was just Lily's mom who died. Tell me something about her, he said finally. Something I wouldn't know. A smile broke through Eliza's tears. She was terrible at poker but insisted on playing anyway. She would get this little twitch in her left eyebrow whenever she had a good hand, gave herself away every time. Mark laughed despite himself. She never played poker with me, not once. Said card games weren't her thing. Because she knew she couldn't bluff to save her life, Eliza said, laughing too now. They stayed at the restaurant another hour, the bill long paid, trading stories about Sarah. Eliza described the Sarah she'd known, fiercely loyal, slightly chaotic, with big dreams of becoming a photographer. Mark shared how she'd eventually achieved that dream, showing Eliza photos of Sarah's work on his phone. When they finally left, standing awkwardly on the sidewalk outside, Mark wasn't sure what to feel. Part of him wanted to run from the complication, from the strange connection that now existed between them. But another part, a stronger part, felt a sense of wonder at how the universe had brought them together. I'd understand if you don't want to see me again, Eliza said quietly. Mark considered this for a moment. I think, he said slowly, that Sarah would have found this whole situation hilarious. Eliza's laugh was warm in the cool evening air. She absolutely would have. I'd like Lily to meet you, Mark said, surprising himself. Not as anything complicated. Just as someone who knew her mother when she was young. There are so few connections she has to Sarah now. Eliza's eyes widened. I'd be honored, she said. But only if you're comfortable with it. This is a lot to process. Mark nodded. It is. But in a strange way, it feels right. Like maybe this wasn't just coincidence. The following Sunday, Eliza met them at the park. She brought a photo album from her college days, filled with pictures of Sarah that Mark had never seen. Lily sat between them on a bench, transfixed by images of her mother as a young woman, making silly faces in a dorm room, dressed up for a Halloween party, studying under a tree on campus. Your mommy helped me pass algebra, Eliza told Lily. She was much better at math than I was. Daddy says I'm good at math too, Lily said proudly. I bet you are, Eliza replied. You remind me of her. As Lily ran off to the playground, Mark watched her go, seeing Sarah in the determined set of her small shoulders. Thank you for this, he said to Eliza. It's like getting a piece of Sarah back, these stories, these photos. Sarah talked about wanting children, Eliza said softly. Even back then, she knew she wanted to be a mother someday. She would be so proud of Lily. And of you, for how you've carried on. Over the following months, Eliza became a regular presence in their lives. She and Mark moved slowly, cautiously, both aware of the unusual circumstances that had brought them together. There were moments of awkwardness, times when Mark felt guilty for the growing feelings he had for his late wife's friend. But there were more moments of surprising joy, of connection, of feeling that perhaps they'd all been given a second chance at family in an unexpected form. 6 months after that first date, as they walked along the beach while Lily collected seashells ahead of them, Mark took Eliza's hand. "Do you ever think," he asked, "that maybe Sarah somehow engineered this? Pushed us into each other's paths?" Eliza smiled, looking out at the horizon. "I'm not usually one for mystical thinking, but in this case? Maybe." She always did like to meddle in her friends' love lives. Mark laughed, squeezing her hand. "I'm glad you told me the truth that night. Even though it wasn't what I was expecting to hear. The truth has a way of coming out eventually," Eliza said. "Better to face it head on." As they watched Lily dancing at the edge of the waves, Mark felt a sense of peace settle over him. His life hadn't turned out the way he'd planned, there had been unimaginable loss, grief that still sometimes caught him unawares. But there had also been unexpected blessings, connections formed in the most unlikely of circumstances. Sometimes the perfect ending isn't what we think it will be. Sometimes it comes disguised as a complication, a twist we never saw coming. Mark had thought he was starting a simple new chapter when he asked Eliza to dinner. Instead, he'd found himself in a rich, complex story where his past and future were intertwining in ways he could never have imagined. And as the sun began to set over the water, casting golden light over Lily's dancing figure and Eliza's smiling face, Mark knew that this beautiful, complicated, unexpected life, was exactly where he was meant to be. Thank you so much for watching this story unfold. If you connected with Mark and Eliza's journey, or if it reminded you of unexpected connections in your own life, please hit that like button. Your engagement means the world to me and helps stories like these reach others who might need to hear them. And if you enjoyed this tale of coincidence, connection, and second chances, consider subscribing to the channel for more stories that explore the beautiful complexity of human relationships. I share new stories every week, each one drawn from the extraordinary moments that make up our ordinary lives. Until next time, remember that sometimes the most meaningful connections come when we least expect them, and every ending is just the beginning of a new chapter waiting to be written.